But first, Liberal leader Susan Lee is under mounting pressure to drop the net zero policy negotiated by Scott Morrison with the Nationals in 2021 as the party seeks to forge a new path forward. The Australian newspaper revealing today that both the Liberal and National Party rooms are divided over their commitments to net zero and energy policies. Joining me now for more on this is Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, Dan Wild. Dan, the coalition adopted net zero in 2021 and since then they've suffered two devastating election losses. Do you see a link between those two events?
Yeah, net zero is a vote loser. Time to try something different. You and I have discussed the many and varied economic and social consequences of net zero to Australia. Talking about the Liberal Party, though, obviously net zero is inconsistent with Liberal values. It enables a massive expansion to government bureaucracy to interfere in almost every single aspect of our lives, whether it's the food we can eat, the cars we can drive, the houses we can live in, the kind of industries that we can have in our economy. So it's inconsistent with any ethos of smaller government. It's also a threat to our national sovereignty because it requires us to import foreign technology, including from China, into Australia. And it's also a massive tax on working Australians. When you look at how energy bills are going up and the cost of living is going up, which is primarily driven by energy costs. So on any count, of course, the Liberal Party should be dumping net zero.
You were a candidate at the recent election in a safe Labor seat. Did you, as a Liberal candidate, have any input into energy policy, into the net zero position?
Not at a central level, Rita. I advocated the cause on the ground, but one thing I can tell you, particularly in outer suburban electorates such as the one I stood for, is that not one single person came up to me and asked me, how is Australia going in meeting our nationally determined contribution to cut our emissions to net zero by 2050 under the Paris Climate Agreement? Funnily enough, that wasn't raised even once, Rita. It might be hard to believe, but Australians are just over the climate fanaticism and want a government which is focused on the bottom line, not on bureaucrats in Brussels.
I just can't understand the coalition sticking with this policy. I said it all throughout this year during the election campaign. The last time they fought an election on this issue, they won the unwinnable election back in 2019. Then they signed up to net zero, devastating loss again. And you can't fight about issues like cost of living when you signed up to this madness, because it impacts every facet of life, from businesses to households to large-scale manufacturing sector. It is absolutely crippling for us. But let's move on to the Albanese government's tax on unrealised gains on superannuation funds in excess of $3 million. It'll come into effect July 1. It's expected to pass both the lower house and the Senate with ease, given the Greens have the balance of power in the upper house. Dan, the Liberals really failed to explain why this tax is so unfair, so grossly unfair. And it doesn't just impact the rich, it also has a massive impact on investment, a negative impact on the investment.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's a couple of things. As with any kind of new tax, it's actually often the rich that can avoid it the best because they have the resources to alter their investment portfolios to minimise the impact of tax. It's actually those in the middle that tend to cop it. The other point is this will damage self-run super funds, and it will channel more money into industry super funds, and which is obviously a benefit to Labor and the unions, given that those super funds are run by unions. I think the other point, Rita, is this tax is incredibly opaque. It's not really clear how it will be administered. And one of the fundamental principles of taxation is you need to actually know how much tax you're liable for. So, you earn an income, you've got to pay income tax. You buy something from the shops, you pay GST. You own a business, you pay payroll tax. Now, we can debate the size and the magnitude of those taxes, but at least they're obvious in terms of how much you have to pay. But this tax is very opaque. So I don't even know if the Treasurer himself can explain how this is going to be enforced or how much tax the typical investor is actually going to pay.
Well, it's going to impact as many as 1.8 million Australians, could spread to other income levels and other structures. It's one that I think we have to keep talking about. But now to the Victorian state budget, and despite the net debt soaring towards 200 billion, Premier Jacinta Allen and Treasurer Jocelyn Symes are hailing a $600 million surplus stand. This is $900 million lower than what was forecast last year. They're hailing this as the state's first back-in-black budget since the pandemic. But really, who are they fooling here? Victoria is in dire financial straits, and we're facing a credit downgrade, Dan. The state's credit rating is already at a record low, and it could fall further.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think that the claim surplus is worth the paper it's written on, because we know that tens of billions of dollars, particularly in the infrastructure investments, have been shuffled off the books. They're done through other vehicles that aren't accounted for in the normal the headline figures that we see written up in the media and promulgated by the government. So you've got, the massive suburban rail loop, which is unpopular, unnecessary, and is unaffordable, and many other costs that aren't included in this. So, look, I think that ultimately everybody knows that Victoria is going downhill when it comes to its finances and economy. This is no longer abstract. We're seeing cuts to funding of schools, potential cuts to health and other services that Victorians rely upon. And of course, if Victoria goes down, it will bring the rest of the country with it. We already know that it's getting a larger distribution of the GST to compensate for the Victorian government's financial mismanagement. And at the end of the day, it's going to be everybody else in this country that will have to bail out the failing state that is Victoria.
Now, CFA volunteers across Victoria have stopped attending callouts, and some have threatened to quit. Some have even burnt their uniforms in fury over the state government's new emergency services tax. This tax replaces the fire services levy. It will be raising more money, and it will be charged alongside council rates. And while all landholders in Victoria are going to be paying for this, it's farmers in particular who are facing massive increases, possibly tens of thousands of dollars. And a lot of farmers volunteer for the CFA, Dan. You can understand why they're so upset.
Yeah, this is an absolute disgrace. It's being done primarily because the volunteers in the CFA are not unionised. So they the government wants to shove out the volunteers and bring them under a union rubric. So this is a disgraceful attack on a critical volunteering organisation being done for political purposes. It heightens the risk to human life in the event of a bushfire, because Victorians rely upon the services of volunteers. And I think it's an example of just how short-sighted the government is when they're attacking the very people that are engaging in a community service that is so valuable. So I think there's a lot to be worried about in the direction of this. But unfortunately, as we just discussed, because the government is so cash-strapped, they're going to be looking to tax absolutely everything that moves.
Well, we are seeing that in Victoria in particular. They are absolutely hooked on property taxes in particular, whether it's land tax, stamp duties, and now we've got emergency services tax, Dan. It really is, again, a disincentive to invest in Victoria. Why would you invest in this state where you're going to be absolutely crippled with taxes, particularly if you're a mum and dad landholder?
Well, that's right. And I think it's also a cautionary tale for the rest of Australia, which is, this is what happens when you don't get your financial house in order. I think for a lot of people, massive government debt is a pretty abstract concept. It doesn't appear to affect their day-to-day lives. But what actually happens is you get reduction to services and higher taxes. And yes, they'll start at the top end. They'll say, we're only taxing property investors. It won't affect people on the ground. But then salami slice after salami slice, it gets worse and worse until you find the economy is plunged into a very deep recession, which is where I fear Victoria is going.